What is up, Bat Family? I hope you guys are doing good. So, in today's The Batman video, I feel like it's finally time I dedicate a video to discussing what so many fans have speculated about for the longest time from the end of the teaser trailer we were given. The question being, just who exactly was Bruce talking to in the very end scene? I also do want to use this video as an opportunity to explore some of the themes and inspiration Matt Reeves is drawing from and giving to Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne and Batman regarding aspects that could truly come to fruition in the movie for our new Dark Knight inspired from the source material and more. So honestly, think of this also as the Batman, a deep dive analysis in the specific sector of Bruce Wayne's mind and psyche, but also a theory video breakdown as well. And the reason why I'm prefacing this video so much is because if you couldn't tell already, this will be a true nerd out for all the hardcore Batman fans excited about the upcoming movie. So as you can tell, this video will be a bit of a long video, but I hope you all enjoy. And also, just to put this out there and just disclaim quickly, before anyone says you're overthinking it with regards to the ending scene, let's just have a little bit of fun here with the theory side of this video. This isn't really something I've talked about in depth before. Breaking down contributing factors to it and what I think is the reality of the situation. So here's the open forum for it, and I encourage you guys to give your thoughts on this down in the comments below after hearing everything I have to say. So before getting into the deep stuff of this video, the interesting thing for me here is that in the first few weeks of breaking down this trailer, letting it digest after rewatching it billions of times, like I'm sure a lot of you hardcore Batman fans have, I dismissed that it could be anyone but the Riddler, with a conversation between Bruce and Riddler at some point in the movie just simply being overlaid in the trailer scene, but not actually in that very scene in the movie. Just merely meant to incite intrigue in fans with how Bruce is connected to the larger corruption in Gotham, of which the Riddler is combating in his own unique way. However, I have to admit, the more I pondered this with subscribers asking me over the months and months in the comment sections of my videos with the question of what if it isn't, the more I kind of questioned it too. And I think this is important to stress as well, regardless of the outcome of the results of the voice in that very ending scene in the trailer, the set of answers that these theories present of this question posed could still be present in the movie, even if this voice is still actually the Riddler. So honestly, stay tuned to see what I mean about that. So first of all, in this video for the theory breakdown side of this, let's start right at the most basic approach before getting into the more interesting details. What does the voice sound like at face value? Well, obviously, I'm not a voice analyst expert who works for the freaking government in an agency expertly trained to crack vocal patterns, but one thing's for sure, to give some merit to this theory of many fans, even though this is of course still subjective, it doesn't sound exactly identical to the lines we heard from the Riddler earlier on in the trailer when he says with his voice modulator, "If you are justice, please do not lie. What is the price for your blind eye?" But at the same time, I totally want to acknowledge that it could be one of those cases where the more you listen to it, of which fans have thousands of times, the more the placebo kicks in of feeling like it truly is something or someone different. The idea of your mind is making it kind of what you want it to be, but in reality, what it actually isn't. But I understand the desire for fans to see this proposed theory come to fruition because it would be very interesting, and as I teased, still possible regardless of the outcome of this voice, whether it's Riddler or not. Now, of course, there are a number of explanations for as to why this voice is a little bit inconsistent to what we heard from the Riddler earlier on in the teaser, the most obvious answer being that it could be simply because he's not professing these lines at the end of the trailer in such a way as he was with the whole "if you are justice" delivery. So fair enough there, right? Like in that part of the trailer, it is like seems to be a situation where he's more bellowing, "if you are just," you know, you get what I'm trying to say. Except the reason why so many fans are interested in this and why it started such a speculative debate among many is because of what Matt Reeves Reeves has detailed about this movie, because at DC Fandom he broke down so many aspects to what his flavor of Bruce and Batman unique to what's been done before, including several source material inspirations. One in particular that very much so lends itself to this theory, and that is, of course, Batman Ego, a graphic novel written by Darwin Cook and Paul Grist. Reeves' teases of this movie and where Bruce is at, how and where things will be explored, I would argue were so detailed that it almost gave away a bit too much. And Batman Ego is honestly a topic and graphic novel and storyline that I've wanted to tackle in a video for quite a long time now when talking about the Batman. So where many fans may think that this movie will lean and borrow heavily from Batman Year One or Earth One, with the early days of Batman, or the Long Halloween with the string of mysterious murders, I would argue it borrows tenfold more from Batman Ego. So Batman Ego is a graphic novel exploring the very mind and psyche of Bruce Wayne to his very core, and heavily emphasizes the character study, if you will, of the duality between the beast that is Batman and then the more humane Bruce Wayne side. To summarize it, to get to the meat of what I'm after here, is that in the graphic novel, he literally has conversations with the Batman side of himself. And I think in some respects, more than others, obviously we don't completely know yet, that the Batman movie and Batman himself will go through a similar arc in this story to what Bruce experiences in Batman Ego, in where he's fairly mentally exhausted after trying to solve these murders, while also being in only year 2 and not having the full trust of the Gotham City Police Department, of which the trailer also heavily implies that perhaps they even feel like the Batman is inflaming the situation with the murders and only making things worse, since these letters are addressed to him and we even see the GCPD literally shooting at Batman among other tense moments in the trailer, as well as Matt Reeves explaining how Bruce is going to have to come to terms and deal with how the public views him. There's many weights being added to a young Bruce Wayne's shoulders here. When specifically talking about the recent events and trauma within the graphic novel, it's due to Batman having recently caught the Joker after one of his sprees of crime, but it's not that simple. The interesting thing that kind of makes it a little bit of a twist is that we also have a goon of Jokers who actually helped Batman in his capture of the Joker because he ratted on the Joker's location. And as a result of this, he is in fear of the Joker getting revenge on him for that. He realizes that he won't be safe in either Blackgate or Arkham, and as a result, he opts to take his own life, with his final words being to spite Batman. Now, as you can imagine, even though this is a criminal or whatever, like, due to the chain of events, this makes Bruce and Batman kind of feel incredibly guilty, and was more or less the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, and was the catalyst for his own crisis. It added to the stress his mind was already under at the time. And as a result of that, his mind more or less fractures and are at odds with one another, with one side being his Batman persona, who is thirsty for vengeance and justice, then this other being Bruce, who is a lot more humane and rational of a standpoint in his conscience. Now, without going into too much detail, there's a lot of internal conflict, confrontation, and it explores many themes and memories of his childhood trauma, and eventually the duality of Bruce and Batman come to a compromise. Bruce realizes that he must accept the guilt of Batman's career and that things like this will be a part of his life, and what may come again in a similar vein, but only if the beast and incarnation of Batman he's talking to will also agree to personify the symbol of hope and not just fear. But in order to personify hope, Bruce proposes that to do that, Batman must never kill. Batman agrees with Bruce and they become one again. Now, I'm not saying that this movie is obviously going to copy and paste literally from the pages and put that into Matt Reeves' The Batman movie, but when I say that Matt Reeves referred to Batman Ego when describing the movie at DC Fandom, he didn't just only refer to it, he heavily emphasized its inspiration on the movie. And just to summarize some of the comments from Matt Reeves about Bruce in this movie, just to kind of add to the context of all of this, his superpower is the ability to endure. Not only the ability, but the compulsion. He's driven by his past, of course, and there's things that he can't quite resolve. It's very much so about the early days of being Batman. He's so far from being perfect. What is interesting is learning how to be Batman for Bruce Wayne in this movie and where he's at in his life. This is all an experiment for him. And at the end of it, it's incredibly personal for him, even though it is the story in which he's trying to understand and unravel this mystery, making the audience feel what he feels. And these final comments that I'm about to abbreviate from Matt Reeves really lend to the theories I'm exploring in this video. He's conforming to the beast that is the Batman during the movie, confronting the shadow side of himself. He's broken. While he's doing all these things for the reasons he thinks is right and that have a heroic grounding in them, there's also many things that are driven by parts of himself that he doesn't yet know. And honestly, I loved just hearing myself read that out loud because I feel like it really lends and borrows from Batman ego there if it wasn't painfully obvious enough. And we've already seen the ruthless beast part of Batman in just the DC Fandom teaser trailer and how untamed Bruce is in the events of this film. And I think one of the things that will be taken out of the Batman ego story will hopefully be the no-kill rule too, because I think that would be really awesome. But back onto the point here. Some of the themes it could also borrow from Batman ego is, of course, the duality of Bruce Wayne, which is why many have suggested from only this teaser trailer and that part at the very end that it could indeed be Batman talking to Bruce. So let's set this part up and why it could be and, couldn't be at the same time. And I hope you're still with me here still. And if you are, seriously, thank you for watching and supporting me on the channel with these videos. I trust that a lot of you guys do like the videos and I just really appreciate that. So honestly, if you've got this far, thank you, thank you, thank you. The very words we hear this voice say to Bruce Wayne are, "You're a part of this too." And then we can clearly hear Robert Pattinson's voice as Bruce reply, "How am I a part of this?" The unknown voice then replies, "You'll see." And so here's my next supporting piece of evidence for this theory, in that if this is the Riddler, still speaking that is, with his voice modulator just in a more casual and less theatrical tone to what we heard earlier on in the trailer, then this line would heavily imply that the main villain, the Riddler of this first movie, knows the identity of the Batman. Because put quite simply, to know that the Batman is part of this larger conspiracy, a part of why the Riddler is doing all of these murders, infers that he knows his identity. His family name perhaps, and larger Wayne connection to the corruption in Gotham, but that's another video. But think about it for a moment. It wouldn't make sense for the Riddler to say to Batman, if he didn't know who was under the mask, that you're a part of this too, if he only literally knew him as some randomer who dressed up as a bat. No. I think it's understandable and logical to propose the theory that to say something like that, you'd have to know who the dude is under the mask. So, you get my point. And by the way, assuming this is the Riddler again, just for a moment, and that we're going along the thinking of those lines would imply that this unknown voice knows the Batman is Bruce Wayne, then yeah, sure. Like, villains have been known to know Batman's identity before and not care about exposing it. And that's a factor here I have to mention of why it could still be the Riddler in this audio part of the final scene in the DC Fandom trailer. Because I definitely just can't chuck that possibility out. That could very well also be the case. But also diving onto the other side of the fence again, if we go along the logic I aforementioned and how, let's say, it probably isn't the Riddler, because let's just say the Riddler won't know the identity of Batman in this movie, then whose voice was that? Well, yeah, you've guessed it, because we've been talking about it for a while now, and along with Matt Reeves' heavy emphasis on the drawn inspirations from Batman ego, and as we went over earlier, it could very well be one of the two voices of the duality of Bruce Wayne. the incarnation of Batman's voice. And in one hypothetical way, this can make total sense, because it could just be Bruce talking to the Batman side of himself in that scene. His Batman side of himself is kind of teasing him by saying, you know, you're a part of this too. So that's his inner subconscious self, his duality, knowing there's something more to this and knowing that he must also be tied to it at whatever point of this movie this line is extracted from, and keeping in mind what he may have learned by then. But then there's his Bruce Wayne and rational side saying, how am I part of this? And then Batman responds, you'll see, because he's the world's greatest detective and he won't stop until he gets to the bottom of it. And with that said, I honestly don't think that's a massive stretch from the imagination, considering everything I've discussed so far in this video. This voice could indeed be Batman talking to Bruce in a kind of introspective inner look in the scene of the movie, which, you know, introspection is probably something Bruce tends to practice, just looking in and thinking about certain things that he has to do, you know, detective mode, something we're getting very focused in this trilogy. But then, of course, as I always try to cater to put both sides, or should I say one foot on each side of the fence here, it could literally just be Riddler talking calmly with his voice modulator in some random scene in the movie, and that is that. But it's also important to note that even if this theory is absolute bogus and we are kind of overthinking it, the reason why I still wanted to make this video is because, well, it doesn't mean that we're not going to get the internal discussion, conversation between Bruce and this other side of himself, especially with those quotes I gave you earlier from Matt Reeves talking about how he's conforming to the beast that is Batman in this movie. Another one, confronting the shadow side of himself. I mean, it's just like green lights all the way, but we don't know quite yet. But of course, assuming this is true, as I said before, I don't think this will be the only inspiration from Batman Ego, because as I said earlier, hopefully we'll perhaps get the no-kill rule established in a maybe similar way to where Bruce is in this movie. As we've seen, he's battering people, but he has a moment where he gets close. I would be totally fine with that, and that kind of frightens him to the point of where, no, not only do I want to invoke fear in the criminals of this city, but like Batman Ego, Batman, incarnation of Batman side of me, we need to be a symbol of hope for the people of Gotham as well. But for now, I've personally and transparently just got to the point of where I've listened to it so many times that it's kind of blurred the lines of who it could really be to where I can imagine it being both almost, especially when considering both the for and against supporting evidence that I've mentioned. It's kind of cracked me in the middle. However, if I had to stake money on it, I would say it's the Riddler at the end of the day. Like, if I absolutely had to, I would say Riddler. But it's still personally just really fun imagining Batman Ego truly coming to fruition in this first movie. But ladies and gentlemen, I would love to know your thoughts on this. Even just theory parts aside, what did you think about the Batman Ego analysis of this video? Are you excited for the possibility of some of those parts bleeding through this movie? Because, well, we know for a fact some parts are, but are you hoping that it's some aspects more than others? Do you think that it would be maybe too crazy of Bruce Wayne to literally talk to a side of himself in the movie? Or do you think that it is understandable because Bruce Wayne actually isn't the most mentally sound person? But do you think it might be too eccentric to display on screen? There's so many possibilities, but like this video, ladies and gentlemen, if you did enjoy it. I know it was a bit of a long one, but I kind of wanted to nerd out in a video and really get into the psyche of Bruce and, well, Batman in this upcoming movie. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you got to this part. That really does mean a lot to me, especially in these longer videos. Shows that you're enjoying the content. If you have any bonus suggestions for stuff I can get into just like this, leave them down in the comments. I would love to focus on another kind of subject for this movie. But other than that, subscribe to never miss out on another video. Follow me on Twitter. Links to that is in the top pinned comment that I pin literally down in the comment section, along with my Discord server and other places you can support me. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, Bat Family, in the next video. Goodbye.